Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Star Wars The Expanded Universe Book Talk with Dorn Geek. I am your host, Dorn Geek, and today we are going to continue our romp through the Callista 3-book cycle. This time, we're talking about a pretty darn good book. Darksaber is what we're talking about today. Let's get right into it. Yes, we are talking about Darksaber, published in October of 1995. Again, we run into this issue of, we don't know an exact date for when in October of 95 that this was published, but it was published sometime during October of 1995, written by the wonderful Kevin J. Anderson, which isn't to say that he doesn't have his quirks. Even Timothy Zahn has some quirks. They all have some quirks, things they're good at, things they're not so good at. I'm a big fan of Kevin J. Anderson. I really like his writing. He does a really wonderful job of writing something that feels like Star Wars, and I'm truly grateful to him for that. Really, I have always enjoyed things that he writes. Let's look at the timeline that we're in. We're in 12 ABY, 12 years after the Battle of Yavin. So we're 12 years after the Death Star, the first Death Star's destruction. We're 12 years after, pretty importantly, actually, 12 years after Grand Moff Tarkin's death. We are 8 years after Return of the Jedi and the destruction of the second Death Star. This theme of the Death Star is going to follow us through this book, so you want to keep it in mind. You're not going to miss the connection. It's going to be very obvious when you get there, but just put yourself in that mindset. We're 3 years after the Thrawn 3-book cycle. We're 3 years after the Thrawn crisis has ended. So that means, one of the things that means is that we're putting ourselves in a new era. One of the things that I wanted to mention with being in 12 ABY is that the previous book was also in 12 ABY. Children of the Jedi, Darksaber is right on the heels of Children of the Jedi, so it's all like one kind of continuing story there. We're also 1 year after the Jedi Academy trilogy. Again, keeping with a very important theme that I want you to keep in mind. And if you know the Jedi Academy trilogy, that image right there makes a lot of sense to you. Let's look at the ages of our heroes. Luke and Leia, the Skywalker twins, are 31 years old. I continue to be amazed that we met them at 19, and they have grown all the way now into their 30s, their early 30s, I grant you. They're still relatively young, and they're at kind of the primes of their lives, the right amount of experience and physical peak, that sort of thing. Han Solo is kind of there too, but he's 41 now, so I don't know. For us on Earth, maybe we would think of that as, being over the hump, turning the corner a little bit in age. But really, in the Star Wars universe, 31 and 41, there's not much of a difference as far as that goes. And then we got to talk about our dear, wonderful Captain Pellaeon. We have not talked about Pellaeon since, what was it? Oh, yeah. We haven't talked about Pellaeon since the Thrawn books. He hasn't really been a part of our conversations. Why? He's just hasn't done anything. But that's all going to change. We are also going to talk about a new character that we're going to introduce, Durga. Obviously, Durga the Hutt, as you can see. Durga is 117 years young. It is indeed young for a Hutt. So Durga is 117, and then we're going to reintroduce Crix Maydeen. Crix Maydeen, the last time anybody ever talked about him was Return of the Jedi. He's the one who put together the mission to Endor. So he is now 43 years old. So he's a couple of years older than Han Solo. Still spry, still relatively young. And then we still got to talk about Callista. I told you in the last book talk in Children of the Jedi that Callista is a very complicated age. She continues to be a complicated age. And if you went through the abridged audiobook of Children of the Jedi, as I suggested you should, you know a little bit about that. Let's talk about the major places that we are going to visit in this book, Children of the Jedi. We're going to be back on Tatooine, and you're not going to want to miss the experience that you get on Tatooine this time. This is, in my mind, one of the absolute best visits to Tatooine that you will have in any book. We're also going to go back to Dagobah. Dagobah, you probably remember. You should remember. I hope you remember. Dagobah is where we first met Yoda, where Luke was sent to be trained by Yoda. Luke has returned to Dagobah before, and Dagobah is a place that's not going away. It's going to continue to be an important place on the timeline for many books to come. Not every book, but it'll just keep showing up. And then we get to return to Hoth. And again, this is a really wonderful trip to Hoth as well. The experiences that you get, like taking old places and turning them into new experiences, is a really big talent that Kevin J. Anderson has, specifically in this book. It really shines in this book. We're going to be in the Hoth asteroid belt again. If you don't remember, or if you're not sure where the Hoth asteroid belt is, it is the asteroid belt that was just outside of the Hoth system, that because the Millennium Falcon couldn't go into hyperspace, it had to traverse the asteroid belt to have any chance of escaping the Star Destroyer that was chasing it. We're also going to get to go to Nal Hutta. I think, not entirely 100% sure, but I think this was our first visit to Nal Hutta in a book. I might be wrong about it. It might have happened one other time, but we're going to get to have a lengthy visit, a whole new experience on Nal Hutta. It's really going to be nice. And again, a place that we're going to keep revisiting. We're going to return to Yavin 4. Yavin 4 just keeps being important and in new and wonderful ways. And it's specifically, again, Kevin J. Anderson that makes Yavin 4 new and important. Let's talk about the major characters that we are going to visit, or that we are going to see, and the major relationships that we are going to encounter. Luke and Han and the Tuskens. A lot of people might call them Sand People. You might call them Tusken Raiders. I don't really, kind of over giving them those sort of bigoted names. I'm just going to call them Tuscans, and I think that's the most appropriate name that I can give them. Then we're going to continue the relationship between Luke and Callista. You know this relationship a little bit from Children of the Jedi, but we're going to get to experience a whole lot more of it in Darksaber. We're also going to find out a lot more about Callista and her relationship with the Force. And I found this art piece on DeviantArt, and it is so good. It is so representative of what I mean here, and you will definitely be able to connect the dots and figure out what I mean, and it's not going to be very difficult, okay? Then we have to revisit an old relationship from The Empire Strikes Back. The relationship between Luke, not just Wampas. I put the Wampas there. But honestly, it's the relationship between Luke and a very specific Wampa. One that we know very well, but you might... I think it might surprise you where we go with it, where Kevin J. Anderson takes it. It's a wonderful journey, okay? Then we have to get into this guy, Bevel Lemelisk. Oh, you guys are going to get to meet new character, Bevel Lemelisk, and I love him. If you paid really close attention during the Jedi Academy trilogy, you heard about him, but you never met him. And his relationship with Durga the Hutt and the lore of his relationship with Emperor Palpatine and just who Bevel Lemelisk is so freaking cool. We'll get into more of it as we go, and I'm going to wind up mentioning it again, but let's continue with our major characters and relationships here. Let's talk about Admiral Dala. Natasi Dala returns, and her relationship with the Imperial Warlords. The idea of the Imperial Warlords had been kind of introduced, like Grand Admiral Thrawn was considered a warlord at one point, but we're going to get to see her relationship with all the warlords and what goes on there, and then Dala's relationship with Gilad Pellaeon. This is a relationship that I'm going to be mentioning a lot over the course of many books as we go on. That relationship starts in this book, and it's so nice, okay? Then we got to talk about Kip Duran, also from the Jedi Academy trilogy. We saw Kip go through a lot in the Jedi Academy trilogy, and we actually saw him go through a lot with Admiral Dala, with Natasi Dala. That... so hard to call that a relationship, but those two are going to interact again, and then we're going to have another character who was a much smaller character in the Jedi Academy trilogy, but he was definitely there. Dorsk 81 and his relationship with Kip Duran. And if I was ever going to have a dream ship that came out of this book, there are already relationships in this book, but if I wanted to try and make one, it would be the relationship between Kip and Dorsk 81. Then we're going to have to look at, consider, and deal with the problematic relationship between Dorsk 81 and his people. And if you read the Jedi Academy trilogy, you learn a little bit about Dorsk 81 and the rest of his civilization and his world. We're going to learn a whole lot more. And then Dorsk 81 and his relationship with the Force itself. This continues to be sort of an angle that gets taken several times in the entire Callista 3-book cycle, is Force users and their relationship with the Force itself. And it's a very interesting thing. It's going to continue in this one with both Callista and Dorsk 81. Let's talk about the major events in this book. Man, I cannot tell you how cool the first one is. This thing that you're going to have happen at the beginning of the book with Han and Luke and the Tuskens, and getting a look inside of Tusken society in a way that will make you depressed for the Book of Boba Fett. And then, oh my God, Bevel Lemelisk's backstory. Oh man, if there's ever a backstory more involved and more, okay, wonderful isn't the right word, but it's still like, I feel wonderful thinking about Bevel Lemelisk's backstory. And then, so I talked about this relationship between Callista and the Force. There's an issue there, and you're going to get to see that there's kind of an awful fix to the issue that Callista is having with her relationship to the Force. I'm not going to tell you what that relationship. I don't want to let you in that deep. I don't want to spoil that much, but you're going to find it out. We're going to have a wonderful little adventure for Luke and Callista on Hoth. And oh my God, I encourage you to not flip through that too quickly, because this book just has a bunch of wonderful moments in it. And they come together to make this beautiful book. And I really, really love it. We're going to see Kip and Dorsk 81 together make a very important decision about their future. And you can't talk about one decision without talking about the other. Again, I don't want to spoil too much about that, but it's a major thing in this book. And another very major thing is Dorsk 81's visit home. Okay, so I'm spoiling a thing there. I'm telling you, Dorsk 81 is going home. But that's okay. I feel like that's okay, because the real important part isn't that he goes home, it's what happens. And that's the part that I'm going to just leave you with and tease you with. We're also going to have Han and Leia go to Nal Hutta. I told you that we get to spend some time really exploring Nal Hutta. Isn't that a wonderful piece of art right there, by the way? And Han and Leia are going to have their adventure mostly on Nal Hutta during this book. And we get to get a different look into Hutt society specifically on Nal Hutta. Very interesting stuff there. And then we get the reappearance of Crix Madine. And I don't want to say a lot about that, because I feel like anything I say other than to remind you that Madine is the guy who put together the mission to Endor. If I tell you any more than that, I might be getting into spoilers that I can't back away from. We're going to have Kip struggle with an old enemy. I have hinted at that previously during this book talk, but I'm not going to spoil very much of that. I don't I'm just, I don't want to tell you what it is. And then Natasi Dala, the character who, when Natasi's there, it's always interesting. It might be horrifically interesting, but it's always interesting. Dala's solution to the bickering but amongst the warlords, between the warlords of the Empire, is, I'm giving away, and it's just a beautiful piece of art, and I'm sorry if I gave away too much. We're gonna have a very big moment for Dorsk 81. I have been hyping up Dorsk 81 so much during this book talk, and he absolutely deserves it. This character was so minor in the Jedi Academy trilogy, but the space that Kevin J. Anderson gives him to grow in this book is so wonderful, and where the story goes is absolutely so good. Then we're going to talk about the major going on. I haven't even mentioned, like, the big thing. There's a big thing going on in this book, and I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about it, and why it all just falls apart. And I promise you, this image will make sense to you later on when you get near the end of the book and you figure that out. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to this book talk on the novel Darksaber by Kevin J. Anderson. Our next book, the final book in the Callista 3-book cycle that we are going to talk about, is Planet of Twilight. Again, written by Barbara Hambly, but I'm happy to say that Barbara corrected a lot of mistakes in this book. I'll talk about that at the end of that book talk. So, thank you, everybody, for listening, and may the Force be with you.